Call this July 12th meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order. Appreciate everyone being here this morning. Please join me, stand and join me in the flag salute, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and please be seated. Okay, we'll open with public comment. Anybody wishing to approach the board on issues concerning the board may do so at this time. Mr. Brian Summers.
Good morning, Brian Summers, Capital Projects and Facilities Manager. On your board's agenda on the consent calendar is an item for award of the Civic Center Parking Lot 6 project. What I'd like to do is just take a moment and talk to you about some of the alternative parking solutions we've developed to offset the loss of the 312 spaces. So using the results of an online survey that we had employees and the public complete for us, we've developed alternative parking lot 1, which is, for those of you who've been around a while, we've rehabbed the old temporary motor pool parking lot west of Human Resources. We've got 207 spaces that will be available during the course of construction. And we've also developed a shuttle service that we'll utilize. We're going to use 15 passenger vans. It'll run from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. We'll have 4 vans on during the morning and afternoon rush hours. We'll start with 2 during the lunch hour, and we'll modify it as we need to. And also, our neighbors to the south and to the west at COS, the Elks Lodge, and Kmart have agreed to allow employees and members of the public to utilize their parking spaces as well. So while we realize this is going to be a little painful, we think it's definitely going to be worth the price of progress, and we're excited to get this project started.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that information and update. Anyone else wishing to approach the board? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment and bring it back for supervisor matters. Supervisor Vanderpool.
I don't really have anything to add today. Just wanted to make mention the Woodville cotton gin or walnut hulling property out there in Woodville is actually having an open house today from 11 to 2. We'll try to make that after the meeting.
Okay. Supervisor Cox.
Yeah, 2 quick things. I mentioned to Supervisor Ennis this morning. I asked Dan Fox, our transit manager, to prepare a report for our next TCAG meeting, and I received a draft of the PowerPoint, I believe, late last week. It's interesting, in the 4 years that our loop bus has been in service, we've gone the first year 1,300, the second year 2,400, the third year 4,700 riders, and this year we're over 11,000 riders on the county's loop bus. So I think that's something that this board had a vision to see grow in the county and is working very well. So by way of a report, give you a little pre-report before our next TCAG meeting. Last thing, I have notified staff that when the parking issue becomes a problem here, to remove or cover my reserved parking space outside here. I will be parking out there with the rest of the folks in the, hopefully if I get here early enough, out in our new lot, out just west of us here.
Thank you. Supervisor Rashida.
Yesterday I attended the San Joaquin Valley Partnership meeting, and under public comments I made a comment that the Board of Supervisors in the 8 San Joaquin Valley counties, in conjunction with the Delta counties, there are 5 Delta counties, but San Joaquin County is classified as both, so there are actually 12 counties. We're working to schedule a meeting in the last 2 weeks of August to talk about the Delta Bay plan and the items that we agree on so we can go forward with that plan and discuss our differences. In the past, it's always been the San Joaquin Valley counties versus the Delta counties. And we're not going to get anything accomplished if that continues. So we're looking to have that meeting with the 12 Board of Supervisors representing those 12 counties. And we also have extended the invitation to city councils in the Delta and in the San Joaquin Valley. The other water issue we had was in the Water Commission meeting yesterday. We had Ron Jacobsmith from the Friant Authority talk a little bit about the San Joaquin River settlement on the EIR. Now, the EIR is 4,000 pages, and they have not had a chance to totally review that EIR, and we should be getting an update somewhere in the first part of August, which will coincide a little before our meeting with the Delta and the San Joaquin Valley Supervisors, because San Joaquin River settlement also plays a part in the San Joaquin, in the Delta Bay Plan. So we're looking forward to that. And CSAC on August 23rd has set aside a meeting just on water. So it'll be a statewide meeting on water issues held in Sacramento on the 23rd. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Well, over the weekend, we had a pretty good-sized grass fire over in the Porterville area, Rocky Hill. They call it the Grizzly Fire. It was up behind the Grizzly High School, Granite Hills, and burned about 840-some acres, vacant house and outbuildings, and, of course, there was a lot of stacked materials and stuff around these houses. It was pretty caustic, so you've got some pretty black smoke out of there, and I know the firefighters, thank God they had breathing apparatuses because it was kind of a nasty fire. Also attended Steve Tree, who was our CAO for the Sheltered Workshops, retiring after 40 years, and saw that grow from just a little tiny place with 3 employees and 38 clients up to over 850 clients today. So congratulations to him on his retirement. Okay, at this time, I think we'll go to consent calendar. 36 and 19 are being pulled off completely, and then we're going to pull item 12 for consideration. I'll entertain a motion on that.
Motion to approve balanced consent calendar.
I'll second that motion.
Moved by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Vanderpool. Cast your votes. The vote is unanimous. So we're going to pull item number 12. Debbie?
Morning, Debbie Vaughn, CAO's office. This item is a request for the board to send a letter of opposition to direct the letter to President Obama in response to a letter sent by Congressman Farr to President Obama requesting that the giant Sequoia National Monument be transferred from U.S. Forest Service management to Park Service management. Congressman Farr's letter apparently stemmed from concern about work that was done on the Trail of 100 Giants to close that down, clear some trees that were considered to be hazardous, and then reopen it. Congressman does not live in our area. Our local congressman does not support transferring the management. Park Service and Forest Service have very different land management uses and regulations. In 2000, when President Clinton declared the giant Sequoia National Monument, the part of that proclamation was that that monument would be retained as Forest Service managed land. There are many local organizations, Giant Sequoia National Monument Association, and numerous other recreational and land use groups that are opposing any sort of transfer, primarily due to the restrictions that it would place on that land.
Thank you. If there's anybody here that would like to speak to this issue, they may do so at this time. Thank you, Debbie.
My name's Bob Bowen. I was born and raised in Tulare, schooled here, and I returned after a 50-year absence trying to earn a living. I returned in 2008. This transfer of 328,000 acres into National Park System is actually coming out of Agenda 21. I don't know if you're familiar with the Earth Summit, 1992, in Rio de Janeiro. I have here a DVD, 23 parts, 20 minutes each approximately, covering sustainable development, connecting the dots. This is by Henry Lamb of Tennessee. I also have a couple of booklets, Henry Lamb's booklet covering the subject. And also this is the freedomadvocates.org out of Santa Cruz County, and this is where Sam Farr's district is. And this is all coming out of UN. And understanding UN Agenda 21, this map created by Dr. Michael Kaufman, the red areas are land that's going to be designated off limits to most human use. That includes over 50% of the land mass of the United States of America done under the guise of the UN. This is all explained in this paper. And one thing, Congressman Farr actually is the only congressman in the history of that body to ever fly the UN flag outside his office. He's the only one. There's also a California Foothills Legacy Area, this article. This came out in May 2011. And you see these shaded areas. And these are your Sierra foothills, Sequoia foothills, San Benito hills on the west side, and the Tehama foothills in Northern California. These are going to be put under very strict usage, and this is just part of this little incremental, piece-by-piece takeover of landmass in the country that Dr. Kaufman has drawn up on this map based on the actual plans by the UN. And once those are taken down, if you see these gaps in between, they'll probably go after those eventually. And this is to move the people under the Smart Growth Program into high-density population areas and live in stack and pack 'em type housing. It's very restrictive, and it's designed to destroy private property rights in the United States and implement UN policies. And I highly recommend that the board, if you don't know about these things, to read up on it. I'm going to leave some of this material here. I've given presentations in Tulare, 2 in Hanford, and 1 in Apple Valley, describing this stuff, showing it to people. I have a recommended reading list. I have my contact information on here. Here's an article from Roseburg, Oregon, the Beacon newspaper up there, where they've been fighting the Agenda 21 up there. Most of this stuff comes in under the radar. It's hidden right in plain sight. It's out there, but it's not pushed in the major media to educate the public on what's going on. And we all need to follow up on this. I started questioning this type of thing in 1956 when I was in high school in Tulare. Answers I got didn't make logical sense, so I spent most of my life trying to figure it out, and I'm finally coming to a good understanding of it. This happens to be from the Congressional Record, and this was presented by Congressman John Wood of Idaho, and it speaks about, it's called The Greatest Subversive Plot in History, Report to the American People on UNESCO. So this is very important stuff. So I'm going to leave this with you.
Okay.
And you
Leave that
can
with
contact me, and I'll have
clerk.
my contact information here.
Okay.
And anyone who
I've
wants
got your-
to...
I've got your card right here, too, so.
Good. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stoneburner.
Larry Stoneburner. I am going to speak as a private citizen. I'm the owner of K-Tip Radio. I serve as a physician member of the Tulare County Farm Bureau Board, and I'm a member of the Tule River Historical Society. I'd like to address the issue here. It's actually a pretty straightforward issue. I brought also things for you to read. I thought it was kind of interesting that on the Forest Service website, they asked the Forest Monument or Park, it asks a series of questions, what can I do at each of the facilities? So the regulations of each determine how you utilize the facility. I couldn't find the specific quote, but it's been quoted in my experience that the foot traffic of boots on the ground of customers visiting the park versus those visiting the Forest Service, about 4 times as many people visit the Forest Service properties as visit the national park. That directly relates to the economic impact of tourism and people utilizing those facilities, not only local folks, but those who come to this area to enjoy it. So I've been involved in tourism evolution. We're in the midst of a process of how we make that tourism promotion more effective and cost effective. This is a very economic issue. They've taken away the ability to use the harvesting of our lumber. And this is a choice where it's really a matter of what choices do the people have to experience the natural environment. Final quote, the most interesting quote is Teddy Roosevelt, who actually started the national park movement way back when. I also gave you some history about the controversy about how to use the park versus the Forest Service is over 100 years debate about how to do it. There's some history that kind of makes it pertinent. I think you'll find informative. But the quote from Teddy Roosevelt is when in doubt, always do the right thing. It's up for you to decide. Thank you. And this is for your consideration.
Thank you, Larry. Yes, sir.
Good morning. This thing and I sometimes have issues. My name's Orville Hudspeth. I'm here with representing 2 groups, the Giant Sequoia National Monument Association and Safari Club International. To be as brief as I can, the Giant Sequoia National Monument Association is an advocate of multi-purpose, multi-use of this area up here. And briefly, if it moved to the park system, then that's going to be a more restrictive environment for our public. There was a statement made that this is for all the people, and it is. We agree with that, but we want multiple use. And we don't want it to be less restrictive. As far as Safari Club International, we are advocates of preserving the tradition of hunting. We do a lot of work with kids and hunting safety and firearm safety. And if this goes to a park service, then hunting will be severely restricted or eliminated completely. There is some hunting in some national parks, but it's very, very, very restrictive. So anyway, we support you in sending this letter. I could go on, but that's basically what I wanted to get across. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
Morning. My name is Pam Canby. I'm an educator with Lindsay Unified School District. I represent several associations and organizations and interests today. I'm the founder and president of the Big Meadows Association, which is a grassroots effort to promote the area around Big Meadows, which is in the Hume Lake Ranger District of the Giant Sequoia National Monument. I'm also a board member on the Giant Sequoia National Monument Association, which is the same association that was mentioned earlier by others. I also represent the residential residences in the area of Big Meadows, which are located on Forest Service land. My interest today is to come in support of your writing the letter in opposition to the administration of the area to be put under the National Park Service. I consider myself a steward of the land. I don't wear a uniform, but I've been loving that land and I've been a resident in this county my entire life. And one of the things that I'd like to share is how the use of the land really affects how the county is viewed by visitors as well as by residents that are here full time. In the Big Meadows area, our association, the Big Meadows Association, we operate an emergency snow hut, a warming hut, in the area right across from Horse Camp. The primary purpose of that hut is to be an emergency shelter. It's used by people of all interests, snowshoers, snowmobilers, cross-country skiers. People come from all over to visit that very pristine area. It is operated diligently by the Forest Service, and I can speak to their supervision of that area because they are out in full force all the time, 12 months a year, but it is especially important in the winter when you're in a very remote area and people are dependent on services for their lives. The Big Meadows Association operates that hut, and I brought with me memory books that I'm not leaving, but these are books where people journal their entries. They have to go in there by snowmobile or by cross-country ski or some other means of snow travel. And these people come from all over the world. They come from the United States, they come from other countries, and they come from your own backyard. What's interesting is that many of them come there because of...
Can we have these, held these to just about 3 minutes?
You bet.
Each,
Thank
please,
you.
Please.
They come there because of the freedom. They're sent there by even Park Service people because you can take your dog there, you can ride your snowmobile there, you can do whatever you want within the restrictions of the area. So it is a matter not only of tourism but also of economic interest because this Forest Service supervised land brings money into our county. The other concern I would just like to briefly mention that is very important to many people up there is that there are cabins that are located in the Giant Sequoia National Monument. They've been in families for decades. We are very concerned that when this, if this administration is changed to the Park Service, that we will have a repeat of the Mineral King experience where the ability to keep our cabins would be severely threatened, and we would not like to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please hold your comments to 3 minutes or less. Please.
Hello, my name is Marilee Reese, and I'm a private citizen. I live in Elderwood. I have held jobs with the National Park Service and with the Forest Service, and I'm now working in the private sector. I work with recreation businesses that have leases on national parks, BLM, and Forest Service lands. So I have probably 30 years of experience in dealing with concessionaires and permittees and also various recreation uses on the national parks and national forests. I was a Forest Service employee when the monument was created, and I know that we came before the county and there was quite a bit of opposition to the creation of the monument because of the fear of recreation, the loss of uses. We were assured, promised, et cetera, that loss would not occur. The interesting thing that has been said in some of the letters supporting the monument going to the Park Service is that the Park Service would better protect the giant sequoias. And I challenge the board to, and I'm totally in support of your opposition to this movement, but the regeneration of giant sequoias is actually better on the national forests because they have thinned out many of the whitewoods and whatnot. And if you go to some of the areas that were controversial back when National Geographic did its study, the Three Sisters area, the regeneration of the giant sequoias there is much better than you'll see in many of Park Service groves because they just protect them and they don't actually manage them. So that the regeneration in Forest Service groves is significant. So I feel confident that the protection of the giant sequoias will actually be better under Forest Service management. I've also seen numerous, because I work with national groups, I've seen significant loss of recreation uses in Yellowstone. The snowmobile issue has been a major thing for 10 years. It used to be private people could go in, then it was by commercial guiding only, and now they're on there, I don't know how many times they've done an EIS, but they're still restricting it down, and the environmentalists are calling for no snowmobile use. In Death Valley used to be a national monument, had a lot of jeep roads, and people could go and explore the area. It was upgraded to a national park, and many of those roads have now been closed off to four-wheel driving. I don't think that if the monument were to go to the Park Service that it would stay as a monument. They would want to upgrade it to full national park status, and then that would be the end of many of the uses. We've seen the closure of commercial pack stations in Sequoia National Park. They closed Wolverton and they closed Mineral King. And, that's me. Okay. I also want to say that I've been a full participant in the Forest Service management efforts to create a management plan for over 3 years. The environmental groups refused to participate. They did send a letter and said that they would not participate in the collaborative effort. So I feel that we are trying, and I support your effort, and I thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to talk on this issue? Please make it brief.
My name's Lee Balo. I'm a retired Forest Service Fire Management Staff Officer on the Sequoia Forest. I certainly agree with everything I've heard today. I agree with the board's letter. I think all those things are right, and I can think of no advantage to moving the monument into the park. A couple things I would suggest you look at, however, is currently the wildland fire protection on private lands in the monument is provided by the Forest Service because of a cooperative agreement with the California Department of Forestry, or CAL FIRE. That would, I suspect, go away. Whether it does or not, you need to know the answer to that before they move the thing. And I'm not as familiar with the co-op law enforcement agreements between the county and the Forest Service, but the effect of monument status or park, moving the monument to the park, needs to be understood before that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Speak to the issue? Seeing no one, close the public comment portion and bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I recognize some faces out there from working on the monument plan, and it was a effort that was taken by the Forest Service to develop a plan that would be agreeable to all parties. And the major concern that we had in the meetings that I attended was to protect the recreational abilities of the citizens to use the monument. And I think that's carried through in the monument plan. And as I mentioned this morning on the radio, and that was mentioned here today, is that the Forest Service and the Park Service have different goals in mind. The Park Service is a preservation type goal, and Forest Service is more of a user type goal. And so they have different philosophies. I use the park and I use the forest a lot. I've spent probably years in the Sierra Nevadas in a sleeping bag. And I would hate to see us curtail the use of the forest, especially with our growing population. We need the ability to recreate, and when 50% of Tulare County is owned by the federal government, I would think that we should open up more recreational possibilities for our residents than we currently have. So I support this letter. I think it's very important to point out that everything starts incrementally. First of all, we got to the monument, which a lot of us opposed. Once the monument's in place, then we went to the monument plan, which is still being reviewed. Now someone's trying to put us in the Park Service, and who knows what happens next, and that may be folded into the national park system. One thing that a lot of people criticize the Forest Service about is the lack of management. Well, overall, the management that the Forest Service provides is excellent. The problem they have is the amount of funds they receive to carry out the management that's needed in the forest. I remember when I was back in Washington, D.C. with Supervisor Worthley, we talked to the head law enforcement officer of the National Forest, and we asked him, how many officers do we have, law enforcement officers? It was under 100 for the entire nation. And they wonder why there's so much marijuana being grown on our national forest. From those efforts of being back in Washington, D.C., we were able to double the law enforcement staff in the Sequoia National Forest and also the Sierra National Forest from 4 to 8 in Sequoia. During that period of time, the law enforcement staff, especially for marijuana in the Park Service, grew substantially larger and faster than it did in the National Forest. So the National Forest has always been kind of the underdog in funding to do forest management versus the park. So I think it behooves us to reach out to our representatives and ask for adequate funding to really manage the National Forest. I know it's long-winded, but I certainly support what the Board of Supervisors are attempting to send this letter. I want to make clear that Chairman Ennis wrote a letter to this congressman over a month ago expressing our concern and our desire not to put the monument in the national park system. So that's all I have.
I echo those comments.
I move approval.
Second.
Supervisor Ishida, second by Supervisor Cox. Cast your votes. The vote is unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move to item number 3. Legislative authority to collect developmental impact fees, traffic facility impact fees. Mr. Raper.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Jake Raper, Director, Resource Management Agency. Mr. Chairman, if we may, if we could open up items 3 and 4. They're companion documents. One deals with traffic impact fees, and the other one deals with public facility fees.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. On June 21st, the Board of Supervisors introduced and waived the first reading of the ordinances for Chapter 25 and 27 relating to traffic impact fees as well as public facilities fees. Today, we're here conducting the public hearing, which would waive the second reading and adoption of the ordinances for Chapters 25 and 27 relating to development impact fees. If the board adopts the ordinances, we would request that the clerk publish the summary of the ordinance within 15 days of the adoption. On November 30th, 2010, the board adopted a resolution which basically put folks on notice that the intent of the Board of Supervisors was to create a development impact fee program. On March 22nd, the board, we proposed on the board agenda the consideration of Chapters 25 and 27. At that time, they continued that until June 21st of 2011 to give opportunity for outreach relating to the ordinance as well as continuing outreach for the fee studies that had been prepared. In April 27th and 29th, we conducted 4 workshops at that point in time. We had, on June 10th, we conducted another workshop on the traffic impact fees and public facility fees. Mr. Fussell, the Assistant Director of Public Works, is spearheading with the assistance of Fred Brucelis and OmniMeans the traffic studies. On the public facility side, it is the Wilden Financial Services as well as myself working on the public facilities. In terms of further outreach relating to the studies, which is not part of this agenda item, we have sent out an invitation offer to go to each one of the cities and make a presentation as to the studies and the content of the studies and the methodologies. To date, no city has accepted that offer. to go out and to make that presentation. As most recently, we had a meeting with members of the Council of Cities. Visalia and Porterville attended. Again, we've restated that offer to go make that presentation to their city councils and any city council within Tulare County to share the Nexus study. The studies have been distributed. They've been out for about 3 months now. We have not really received any substantial comments back on the studies. We received some verbal comments, some follow-up comments from the public works directors on the city side on the traffic fees, and Mr. Fussell is addressing those. We received one letter from Home Builders Association on the public facilities fee study, as well as a traffic study, and we are addressing those issues as well. But today, we are here to consider the second reading and adoption of the ordinances for Chapter 25, which deals with the traffic impact fees, and also Chapter 27, which deals with the public facility fees. In summary, the ordinance has been distributed to all the cities, their city managers, the city public works directors, and city planners for their review and comment. So that concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Questions from the board? Okay. Not? This is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing for anyone wishing to speak to these issues. Items 3 and 4.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Bob Keenan, President and CEO of the Home Builders Association of Tulare and Kings Counties. Before I address this issue, I'd like to respond to comments made by Mr. Raper. One, the fee studies are old, they're flawed, they're inaccurate, and no one wants to comment on them or have a review of them because the 2 meetings held here, city people attended, our industry attended, and others with economic development parties attended and found these 2 studies to be totally useless. So that's why no one wants to hear them again. In regards to adopting these 2 items today, the legislative authority to collect fees, the Home Builders Association and others suggest that you don't. One, we can't figure out the rationale of adopting an authority to collect fees when the document, the general plan, that actually presents the fee collection or impact fee imposition hasn't been adopted. The studies, as I mentioned, are flawed, and so they can't be adopted. So we think it would be better, and we request that you put off this and put it on the same agenda as the adoption of the general plan. Adopt the general plan, it's next on the agenda, you adopt this authority. In a previous memo we've sent you, we're on record of pointing out that we believe for a county to collect fees inside an incorporated city is illegal. And you consider that because 2 items in your closed session are responding to that. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue? Not? Close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, if I can, first, last time we had this, I voted no, had some information pointed out to me in the actual ordinance language itself, and then I acknowledged that the next meeting that I had not seen that language. Even after having seen this language, I'll still refer back to a memo I wrote to this board in March of this year when I proposed that we do, as several have suggested, that we postpone this, handle the process differently, working with hand in hand as we develop the studies and the fees with the cities and the development community. So I'll again oppose this, but acknowledging that this language is there. We have worked very hard with with all of the cities, including the Council of Cities, and I think we're just very close, and I think this might be a little premature.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how to express this for the 50th time, that we are not here to adopt fees. We are here to adopt an ordinance to authorize in the future to adopt fees. These fees are not mandatory to any city, that we cannot impose fees on cities. Cities can come into an agreement with the county to collect those fees. We had a meeting the other day, and Supervisor Worthley pointed out very pointedly that 95% of the growth from the last census occurred within incorporated cities. But we have to provide public safety services to all those people. So when you have 95% of the population moving to, the growth in the cities, who pays for the facilities for a new jail? If you go down the street here, this jail is going to have to be upgraded or removed shortly because the term of the life expectancy of that building is about at its end. So we have to have probation, we have to have facilities for our sheriff's department, we have to have facilities for our district attorney, and we have to have facilities to incarcerate people. So if we just relied upon the unincorporated residents to build these facilities, that's 5% of the total population in this county that burden would fall upon. So I believe that these fees are extremely important to the financial health of Tulare County, and that we need to go forward in adopting the ability to put these fees in place at some point in time. Now, as we know, that point in time is in the future because of the economic downturn that we're in today. It could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years before the fees are put in place. But we've known from experience, especially on our general plan, with trying to work with the cities and making concessions with the cities to adopt city standard building codes for the 8 incorporated cities in the county jurisdiction, that it costs a lot of money for the county to provide that service for future growth of the cities. We offered that as part of the reasons to adopt impact fees. So we've been negotiating with the cities for over 2 years on this issue. And I knew at the end, the negotiations with the League of Cities was all about impact fees. It was not about the concessions that we were going to make in our building codes. So that's one of the reasons our general plan is behind time, because we've been negotiating with the League of Cities for an extended period of time. This is the time to adopt the authority to go forward with the ability to put impact fees in place. I can say that I concur with the Home Builders Association that these fees and the outreach that we've had based on this study that is dated, which was really done during the boom of construction, are outdated, and those fees will need to be reviewed in the future before they're put in place. Right now, if you took the building construction cost of facilities, it's substantially down. We're probably 30% of the cost of construction today as it was when that study was done. It may not be the same 4 or 5 years from today when these fees are put in place. So we are not adopting fees. We are adopting the ability to put fees in place. And the one thing we've been very successful in Tulare County, and especially with Tulare County Association of Governments, you pre-plan and you put things in place to where when things are advantageous, you can put them immediately into effect. And that's why we have Highway 99 being built. That's why we plan ahead. The process takes so much time to go through the process that we're doing the process now, and everybody's aware of the process, but that takes at least a year out of the process to put these impact fees in place. So it's just pre-planning and getting ready for the future. And I want to mention again, these fees are voluntary to be collected by the cities. And in return, the county will voluntarily have building standards around these cities to city standards. So it's not a one-way street for these cities to agree with the county about impact fees. And there are many more other concessions that the county were willing to give to the cities that would collect their impact fees. But no matter what, today is not a practical day to implement fees, just the authority.
Supervisor Vanderpool?
Mr. Chair, I had the opportunity to reach out and speak with several of my constituents and specifically builders in my district, and they had the same concerns that were echoed by BIA or Builders Association Bob. It's frustrating to me that we've been negotiating and been discussing this issue with the cities for several years, and there still is a lack of communication and there's a lack of understanding as to how the fees are going to be structured, what projects they relate to. Some projects that are on the list have been completed, so the fees are the study is definitely outdated and needs to be updated. But I'm supportive of this, and I have been supportive of this just because we're establishing the authority. But when it comes to actually establishing the fees, I'm very hesitant because I think that to establish something that's going to be written in stone, you should be able to directly correlate that to projects in the future. For example, if we're going to be building parks and dedicating money towards parks in the future, how do we know that the county's going to have money for those parks in the future that we're dedicating impact fees to when we can't really tie it directly to a specific park or to that project with any level of certainty? I'm real hesitant and frustrated with the fact that there is a lack of understanding between the Builders Association, the cities, and the county. So I would actually be supportive of. I agree with Supervisor Cox. I think we're that close. We're very close to understanding this and reaching the same, basically a meeting of the minds. And I think if we could continue this, I don't want to keep continuing it, but if we can continue this, I think we're one step away from being there and having agreement between the cities and the county as to the fee program. I don't know what the pleasure of the board would be in terms of continuing it, but that would be my
Well, I don't think we're setting fees today.
No, I understand that.
Fees,
Just
and
establishing the authority.
Continue on as a negotiation. What we're doing here today is just the legislative authority to be able to collect fees at a certain time and date down the road. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to comment, because I've been a part of the negotiations for some time. I would, it's up to the board to determine whether they want to go forward with this aspect of the fee process. But I would recommend strongly that when we bring the general plan forward, the concessions or the language changes that we've made not be adopted until the cities agree to collect the impact fees and the other provisions of the agreement. The general plan hearing is going to be coming up in the next, I believe, in August. And I look forward to that. But I think it needs to come forward without any changes that we've made. Again, contingent on the cities agreeing to the provisions of the MOU, which are revenue sharing and the collection of impact fees. From my perspective, the concessions that we've made in language in the general plan are significant, are not going to help the county's revenue generation in the future, and we need to be compensated accordingly.
You know, I want to point out is the general plan versus the ability to collect impact fees, the authorization of impact fees. What is it, the chicken or the egg? I mean, this is what it gets down to. What comes first, what comes second? I think I fully support going ahead with the authority to do this. Now, I know there's an election coming up, and this is not very popular with some of the cities. But, you know, you have to plan ahead for the future of this county. You just cannot make decisions based on an election cycle. So I move approval.
Hey, hang on, go ahead, Captain.
I just wanted to clarify, the general plan staff draft that's coming forward would provide exactly as Supervisor Ennis and Mr. Rousseau have discussed. That is, an agreement carries certain, call them benefits, but if there is no agreement, those benefits are not conferred. So that is what's coming forward to your board, I believe, next month. I'm sorry for interrupting.
And Mr. Chair, excuse me, I'll actually second that motion by Supervisor Shida. I just, again, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, we need to do a better job of outreach and communication with the cities and with the Builders Association and make sure that they understand exactly what we're doing. There's the good, clear communication when we do actually establish fees. I'm okay with establishing the authority. When we actually establish the fees, we need to make sure that the cities understand, the county understands their perspective, and we understand the builder's perspective, and the builders also understand our perspective. So as long as there's good, clear outreach, and as long as it's phased in over time, the fees are phased in over time, I can be supportive of that.
I'll be brief. This is not about an election. This is about the process. It's always been about the process for me. I stated that clearly in my memo to the board several months ago.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Shida.
Mr. Chairman, if we could clarify, because the hearing was opened as to items 3 and 4.
It's for items.
Assume it's for both
It's for
items
both
3
items
and
3
4.
and
Is
4.
that correct?
Right.
That's correct.
Supervisors? Yeah.
Second by Supervisor Vanderpool. Cast your votes. It's 3-1 with Cox voting no. Okay, let's move on to item number 5. Public hearing for consideration of sewer and water user fees, adjustments to specific county service zones.
Morning, Board. Brett Fussell, Assistant Director, Public Works for the Resource Management Agency. I apologize for moving a little slow this morning. I was working in the shop Sunday afternoon and threw my back out. And it's kind of manifesting itself down my right leg, so if you see me kind of hopping around, it's to try to relieve some of the pain.
You, Mr. Fester, you're not going to lead us to believe that you were working in an RMA shop, are you?
No, I was working, some of you know that I'm building a Factory 5 replica Cobra, and I was contorting myself to drill a hole under the dash, and that just threw my back out. So.
Hey, Brett, before you get started, Sam, do you have anybody that needs translation out in the audience?
Atención, damas, caballeros, en este momento, por su conveniencia, puede dirigir su atención para atrás del cuarto. La señora Kathy está lista para ayudarle. Caso que necesite un aparato para traducir esta parte de la agenda en inglés a español. Una vez más, la señora Kathy está lista para ayudarle en caso que necesite un aparato para traducir esta parte de la agenda en inglés a español. Gracias.
Anyone requesting it?
Not that I see.
Okay, well, then you can go ahead.
Thank you. Again, the item this morning is the annual hearing to adjust the user charges for the county zones of benefit for the water and sewer systems that it operates. And as was just noted, we do have translation services available for our Spanish-speaking residents. who are in attendance at the hearing this morning. The board set the public hearing back on May 24th. We then mailed notices to all of the affected zones of benefit on May 25th, as well as published notice within the Visalia Times Delta on May 25th as well. The county operates 11 small sewer and water systems that were built back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. These systems were built with grants from the state and federal government, as well as loans from the United States Department of Agriculture. And these systems include a sewer system in El Rancho, a sewer system in Delph Colony, a Delph Colony water system, which, by the way, is not subject of a rate increase this time around, Seville sewer, which also is not subject of the rate increase, Tonyville sewer, Tullyville sewer, sewer system in Traver, Yedem, a water system in Yedem, a sewer system in the Wells Track area, and a water system in the Wells Track area. And here's a map that identifies where these are at. The El Rancho, Tonyville systems are sewer systems, and they both obtain treatment capacity from the City of Lindsay treatment plant. So we purchased treatment capacity in the Lindsay facility for these two systems. The Tullyville system has its own wastewater treatment plant that we operate and maintain. Wells Track, we have a water system and a sewer system, both of which services are purchased from the City of Woodlake. Seville and Yedem have sewer systems for which treatment capacity is purchased from the Cutler-Orosi Joint Wastewater Treatment Facility. In the case of Yedem Water, we actually have 2 wells and a storage tank, so we independently provide water. In Delph Colony, we have a sewer system with a treatment plant, and then we have a well system, storage tank system, independently provide water to Delph Colony. And in Traver, we have a sewer system for which we have a treatment facility and independently treat the sewage from the community of Traver. The table's similar to what you've seen in past hearings in previous years. Table number 1 is a summary of what has happened for the 2010-2011 fiscal year as relative to expenses and revenue. And then, as you're aware, if there's a net cost to the individual zone of benefit, that is supported by a loan from the revolving loan fund that was set up back when these systems were started. And in the cases where in all cases, what we do in order to identify what the operating costs are to determine what that loan from the revolving fund would be is we subtract out depreciation. So basically, we are not collecting depreciation in the user charges. We're only covering the actual hard cost of operating the systems. In the cases where there is a negative number, that means that we're actually collecting revenue in excess of what the net would be between the expenses and the depreciation. So in the case here, we're actually funding a portion of depreciation for the Seville sewer, and we're not then taking a loan from the revolving fund to cover the net operating costs. Table number 2 is if you were to continue with the same rate structure into this next fiscal year with what we estimate the budget to be in each of the individual systems. Again, subtracting out the depreciation number from the estimated expenses, you can see what the net cost would then be for each of the individual zones of benefit, and you can see that if without a rate adjustment for the 2011-12 fiscal year, it would be estimated that we would need about $141,000 from the revolving fund to cover the net expenses over revenues. Table number 3 shows what those numbers would be if the proposed rate adjustment is adopted by your board. In most cases, it's a 10% rate adjustment, which is the limit according to board policy that was adopted many years ago. Based upon the budget, we were originally posted for only a 5% in Delph Colony sewer zone of benefit. And again, you can see here, we're not recommending a rate increase in Seville nor in the Delph Colony zone of benefit. And from these numbers, again, the net cost of operating these systems, again, subtracting out depreciation, with the proposed rate increase would be about $97,000 from the revolving loan fund. And then the last table that I've provided is a table that identifies what the rate increase as far as the proposed fee and what the percentage increase would be if you were to, fully fund the systems, again, less depreciation. So again, even in this scenario where we're showing a significant a rate increase, we're still not accumulating depreciation, which is, again, money that would be set aside to pay for when you have a major capital replacement or improvement that would need to be made to the particular system, just due to age, et cetera. And then this is just the exhibit that shows what the rate adjustments would be. This is the notice that would go out to the individuals, letting them know that the rate has been adjusted by your board this morning. The other comment that I would want to make, as you're aware, the last 2 years, during this hearing, we've received written protests, which is allowed under Proposition 218. And in fact, as a result of those written protests, I know for back up 1 second here, it's the, I get my T communities confused sometimes. It was the Tullyville area for which a sufficient protest was received that those rates were not adjusted for the last 2 fiscal years. In addition, last year I actually came forward and recommended to you that you not do a rate adjustment at all except for the Traver system, which I believe was approved. So with that, I'd attempt to respond to any questions that the board may have, and then I would ask that you open the public hearing and receive public testimony.
Any questions?
Only one. We call it the revolving fund, but how many ways does a revolving fund really rotate?
This one, unfortunately, only rotates in one direction with money coming out, and the budget includes interest on the revolving fund. So if there's a loan from the revolving fund to one of these zones, that interest is calculated and is included within the budget for the attempt to at least pay the interest back. But the principal that's borrowed is not within the rate increase.
Is there a way to start depreciation? I mean, that's something that has bothered me a long time in the county, that we've years ago swept our depreciation, that we have no depreciation not only for these systems, but I don't think for anything in the county, or type of replacement fund. What have you given a thought? What would it look like if we were to start setting aside 10% of the annual fund for these folks as a emergency fund? I know we're not even covering the costs now, right, but we're beyond not covering the costs, we're not even planning for the future, so we're hitting ourselves in the gut twice.
I understand, Supervisor Cox, and my assessment of the only way to get there would be to at least get the rates to a level where you're recovering the actual operating cost, plus then that 10% or that amount, which could then go towards accumulating depreciation. One of the things that we do is we recognize that as things age, pumps need to be replaced, equipment needs to be replaced, or it needs a significant maintenance effort in order to keep it operating. We actually review that list with our contract vendor, and based upon our staff's assessment of the needs and our consultants' assessment of the needs, determine whether or not that's something that should be in the budget next year or not. In a lot of cases, we actually strike stuff out. In the case of the El Rancho, it's suggested that we should be looking at purchasing and installing a pump in the lift station because of its age. We have actually, which is a $13,000 estimated expense. As far as developing the budget for your consideration of these rates, we said, no, we don't have the money to do that. We're not going to do it next year. So when we do that, we're banking on our ability to continue to maintain the system and not have to replace that pump. The other negative aspect of operating these systems is under the State Regional Water Quality Control Board, of the need to be able to manage any sewage spills that we have. Basically, the policy is zero spills. So we try to manage these systems in a way to make sure that we don't have to respond to a spill or report that spill.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I was just, Britt, do we continue to look into some way to connect through regional systems or to the cities more? Because, you know, I look at this and this is just unsustainable. If you look at the third table and you look at the proposed, or what would be needed for rate increases to make it cost covering, so to speak. I mean, there are rate increases all the way up to 70% that are needed. And that's pretty insane. And that's, you know, you're asking some of the poorest people in the whole county to pay some of the most expensive rates. And I just think that there's got to be some better solution out there. I don't know if we're looking for grant monies or in negotiations with cities to connect them, but we come forward with these rate increases year in, year out. And I know that some communities benefit because they are self-sustaining, but we got to look for some other kind of solution, because it is very difficult to continue to do this.
Those conversations do come up from time to time, but at this point in time, they're not, you know, aggressively being pursued. There may be an option, you know, to connect again, I get my T communities, Tullyville, to the city of Exeter, because it's nearby, and I believe there are some discussions going on about possible connection to their water system. You know, everything else is pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, except for maybe the community of Delph Colony. And I mean, we'd be happy to continue to look at that and continue to look for, you know, grant funding to try to facilitate that. I know there's been discussions by the board about, well, if we can grow these systems, we have a larger connection base over which we can spread the fixed cost. That would help keep the rates down. But what we found with the two systems like Seville and Yedem that are connected to the Cutler-Orosi Joint Powers wastewater treatment plant is that we're already at the capacity of our agreement, and they have no interest in selling us any more capacity. And the same with the city of Lindsay, with El Rancho and Tonyville. Some of those areas really don't have any room to grow. Seville, Yedem do, probably El Rancho and Tonyville don't, because of what we're servicing.
Well, and you know, I know in the discussions we've had with the Seville water company issues and connecting Seville and Yedem, just being able to connect the two systems and be able to spread the costs amongst a larger population would hopefully result in decreased costs for all the people. You know, solutions like that are really what we need to look into, where we can't connect to a city or an even larger entity like the Cutler-Orosi utility district. I just think we've got to look into those kinds of things as aggressively as we do study rate increases and budget and do all these things. These are all negotiations that I think really have to take place.
Rousseau?
Gene Rousseau, CEO. As you well know, Supervisor, when we go to Sacramento and Washington, we've been asking for funds, grant funds, to do just what you're talking about. And we do have the disadvantaged community project that we brought an analyst on a couple months ago, and we'll be looking at those scenarios, hooking communities up, hooking communities to nearby cities and what have you. And we are doing what we can, but we do certainly need to push the pedal harder.
And just to comment in response to that, Gene, I think that it would be helpful to have that same report in conjunction with this report from Britt talking about the rate increases. Maybe a report, Alan gives us a pretty good report, Supervisor Sheeta gives us a good update about what the Water Commission is doing, but you know, maybe have our analysts come in and make reports about what she's been working on and a different opportunity she sees, just in conjunction with talking about the fee increases.
I agree. We can have her come in and bring a quarterly update. That is a 2-year grant, so we should be finishing that up sometime next year, and then so we're all comprised of where we're at in the process.
This issue is being addressed by the Water Commission and has been since the formation of the Water Commission. And that's one of the reasons we were able to secure a $2 million grant from the state of California. I want to make a couple observations, though, on these communities. And I know for a fact that a lot of the people in these communities have a very difficult time paying for the services that we're providing. And those services we're providing, we're going backwards on. Something that really bothers some of us supervisors is the fact that we have a lot of people in these districts that aren't paying their bill. And that's a very disturbing fact, that it's on the backs of the people who are paying their bill. So I think we need to address that issue on the people who are receiving service and not paying for that service. And who knows, we may have to go and put meters on some of these people. The other thing this reminds me of is when I was a very young man, I moved out to a farming community called Biola, and I paid an $85 a month rent, so it's been a while. Well, come to find out in the wintertime, my propane bill was $130 to heat that house, old farmhouse I was in. There are reasons people move out into these communities that other than just economic. My reason was the fact that I had family health care, child care in that area because of relatives or ties of other relatives living in a community. So there are intangible things that are reasons why some of these people live in these communities, and they're very valid. So it's not just everything has to be cheap, because what they're not paying in rent, they're paying in water. So there's a trade-off, and there's a reason people are willing to live there to make that trade-off. So it's not always dollars and cents.
Chairman, if I might respond to Supervisor Ishida's first comment. Yes, we do have a delinquency. In fact, you saw that list 2 weeks ago when we set for public hearing, the annual hearing to place that delinquency on the property tax roll, and I will be before you at your next meeting on July 26th for that public hearing. So in the case of those systems where we have delinquent ratepayers, we do put that delinquency on the property tax roll. What has happened to the operation of these systems is that with the termination of the teeter plan, the zones of benefit actually got their money, so they had the cash that now was placed on the tax roll to use. As a result of the teeter plan no longer being in place, we now are like everybody else, all the other cities that have placed things on the tax roll. We're waiting for those property tax payments to be made, and then there is the risk that you may have a property owner that now continually doesn't pay his tax bill until it becomes 5 years old, at which time it then goes to tax sale. So, and also in response, where we have a water system, we actually do have the ability, and we do actually go out after notice and turn off the water to invoke payment, at least on the water bill.
I don't think we have that available to us in Seville, though.
That's the problem, is having that capability. And I will be bringing to you, in fact, I believe on today's hearing, you actually set for a delinquency hearing on the Seville water for August 9th. So we'll be bringing those before you as well.
More questions from the board? If not, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue may come forward. Any materials, including documents, pictures submitted, will become public records, so if you have things to submit.
Hi, my name is Mark Estrada, and I live in Yedem, and I have some protest petitions I'd like to submit, and just say, I mean, our rates are really high, and I realize that there's a lot of people that don't pay, especially in Seville, and I don't blame them. I mean, they don't have potable water that they can drink or even wash with. It makes it kind of hard for people to want to pay. I guess there is money to connect the two systems, for a study to connect the two systems. I don't know where that's at right now, but hope that happens, and that's about all I got to say right now. And we pay a lot already, so.
My name is Letitia Ceballos, 21663 Brooks Avenue, Tonyville. We also have some petitions from the residents of Tonyville. As you see, I think the people are just getting tired of the same thing over and over and over, like Mr. Vanderpool said. I mean, people just, every year, we're doing the same thing, coming in for the same reason. And I think it's time that we also get a look of what is being spent. Is there any way that we could get a estimate of what is spent and what was spent in the year before? I think if you take your car to be repaired, you want to know what they did to it and why they're charging you so much. And I think the residents have the right, since we are paying for these services. We also, like I said, we have, I believe, 45 petitions that were signed, and we have 67 active sewer line hookups. And I would also like to say that the people, like he said, are a poor community, and it is very hard to pay the sewer rate increase. Actually, we have the water, which is not too expensive, but at the same time, what could you do with it? Take a shower? You can't drink it, so we're also having to buy the water. So this is kind of stretching the dollars out right and left, and they're pulling us right and left, and it's just getting harder and harder for the residents. And I just wish that you could come up with some other kind of grants or any other services. When we first agreed to have the sewer line hookups, we were told it would be a $20 fee, and then we would be okay with that. Like Mr. Shida said a little while ago, pre-planned. That's what they should have done. They should have pre-planned to say, in the future, you're going to keep paying more and more and more. But we weren't told this. We were told, it'll be about $20. What do you think? Can you pay that? Can you guys afford this? And we thought, yeah, I think we can afford $20. But now where are we at? At $60? This is what we're going to have to pay starting next month? I think something else needs to be done. I think this has gone on for too long. Thank you.
Dr. Cruz, and I'm also representing Yadam. I have a couple more protest votes. So if...
From where?
My great-grandmother actually owns a lot of property out there, and she rents it out to a lot of people, and she pays for their sewage and their water. And I know that, for a fact, I was looking at these $40, $50 payments on water, and we still have to go out and buy the 5-gallon jugs and put them in dispensers to have cold drinking water. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue?
My name is Juan Sandoval. I'm from Wells Track. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that the same thing happened, and they said that Wells Track had a $60,000 surplus. And still we're getting a hike rate like the other colonies, I guess. So what happened with that money there? Also, too, you say, we deal with the poorest sections or the poorest people that we live out there. That's why we bought, because we had our own water system, which were the pumps and the sewers, the leach lines. Like this lady said too, I remember about 20 years ago when Manuel Jimenez is the one that went out there, and he said, I wrote some grants up for you guys to get water and sewer, and he said $20. I'm trying to look for that original contract, but I can't find it. And I've asked all these people there too, and they say they can't find it either. When you say the poorest people, yes, we are. Wells Track, let me give you, they call it Wells Track because I live on Wells Street. There's St. John's and Webb and Naranjo. Let me give you what's on Wells Track. The corner house, they're orange pickers. The second house, this is south, going from the south to north, from Naranjo, north. First house, they're orange pickers. Second house, the guy has a trailer, ladders out there, so that tells me he's a foreman. The next house, the lady's 85 years old. She's getting some type of assistance. The next house, the lady's husband's died, and she's getting assistance. The next house, my brother's there. He gets $800 a month through, I guess, disability. You guys are going to say, well, he should have got a better job and gotten some money somewhere else, invested. Well, he didn't, and that's the way that it is. Now, $90 or $100 that we're paying, that's 10% of his income. The next house, they take care of foster kids. The next house is a disabled lady that can't walk. The next house is a gentleman that used to work as a foreman. He's 85 years old. He's also disabled. The next house, they're orange pickers. That's across the street. Now, on my side, the first house burnt down, so they built another one, and Audie Ray is renting it out. The next house is a young kid. He's going to school. He has 3 kids. The next house, a lady with 4 kids. She works in Tulare Union, the cafeteria. The next house is myself. On workman's comp, I work, so I'm hurt. And with me, my insurance from the company, they call me up that because I've been off for 6 months, it's being canceled. And I take heart medication pills that I cut in half. The next house, the lady works in Monrovia, and her husband.
Can we have you wrap this up a little bit?
Okay. Well, I'm just giving you, when you say poor people, that's how it's going.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We need to count the ballots prior to...
I believe that there are some issues regarding verifications that will need to be...
Yes, Board. Again, Brett Fussell, Assistant Director of the Resource Management Agency. For the community of Yedem, I received a total of 29 protest letters. However, 11 of those, which were submitted by the speaker who spoke on behalf, I believe, of his mother, Maria Valero, were not signed, so we need to check the validity of the protest letter if it's not signed. However, in any regard, Yedem has 64 connections, and so 29 would, even if all of them were valid, would not be sufficient to meet the majority protest requirements. In the case of Tony...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, the 29 includes the 11 that are not signed?
Yes, right.
Okay.
20, yes, there was 18. The first gentleman that spoke presented 18, and the second gentleman that spoke on behalf of his mother in Yedem submitted 11.
Thank you.
In the case of Tonyville, there were 34 protest letters received. There are, our records are indicating that there's 67 connections. So in that particular case, that one might meet the threshold for a majority protest until I have staff have a chance to take a look at those letters to make sure that they are valid addresses and there's not a duplication or et cetera. I would recommend that your board adopt the resolution putting the rates in place for all of the communities with the exception of Tonyville, and we will review the protest letters and come back on July 22nd with an assessment of the validity of that protest. That's been the process that we've used for the past 2 years when we've had protests received during this hearing process.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
I know the audience, there's some concern in the audience here. Tonyville is excluded from the rate increase until they can verify the protest letters.
I'd be happy to go over the envelope with the lady that presented them and make sure the count is correct, but unless I missed something, I counted 34.
Okay. Could you come forward, please?
We do have 67 hookups. If one person or one property owner has 2 houses, they should count as 2 signatures, correct? Because how would we get 67 signatures if there's, let's say, 40 property owners.
That's the
Signature would have
purpose
to
of-
count for each house.
That's the purpose of the staff reviewing and validating. There's a
Right, because
specific.
we have, yes, some,
There's a specific statutory layout of how they're counted and how much they count for, what the weight is, and that's what staff will be doing over this next week.
correct, okay.
And that's true. What I did was I just went through the packet and counted the number of pieces of paper I received, and did not go through detail whether one protest letter might include multiple accounts and addresses. So we will be taking a look at that to determine the validity.
Okay, so the...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
To be consistent with the last 6 years, although I do sympathize with the conditions there, I'm still of the opinion that we should not be subsidizing, or that the rest of the taxpayers in Tulare County should not be subsidizing the others on the services, so I will be voting no on this item. I'm going to assume, and we know what that word means, that there's going to be a motion to approve.
You're making the motion to approve?
No. I'm going to assume there's going to be a motion to approve, so that you know why I'm going to be consistent with my past votes. Even though I agree in increasing the rates, I think we ought to go to table 3 to use the increase that would, is it table 4, Britt? It's table 4. I mean, I would support table 4, which brings them up to a no cost to the county rate. But I'm not going to make that motion. I would support that, though.
Before I make a motion, I want to make a couple observations here. We go through this every year with these communities, and I think the staff needs to meet with the communities and explain the cost of what it costs to operate and the cost incurred and how this thing's funded. And they need to go into each community that comes up on our list every year and go over these figures so the people have a better understanding of the numbers that we throw out. And I think we need a little bit better communication with some of these smaller communities on the systems we run. The other thing, these communities, and I recognize some of you, we need some help. And what I'm specifically referring to is Tulare County's basically a rural community, a rural county. We have Lindsay, Exeter, Farmersville, Woodlake, but mainly Exeter, Lindsay, and Farmersville have exceeded a 10,000 population. And when they exceeded the 10,000 population, they're not eligible for the same USDA grants for water and sewer that they were before. So that hooking up the outlying communities becomes very difficult because they can't get the grant money. So currently, Congressman Nunes has a bill that he's sponsoring with other Valley congressional people to designate the San Joaquin Valley in a special designation as a rural, I can't remember exact words, but we would get special consideration because of our large agrarian population in the population makeup of our counties. So I would suggest that the activists in the communities or the landowners please write Devin Nunes' office with a letter of support for this legislation. That's the only way we can hook up the communities surrounding Lindsay, Exeter, and Farmersville to spread the water costs. Is they're going to need to get the ability to get grant money in to expand those facilities.
And Mr. Chair, just to kind of dovetail off that comment, you know, having the people that live in these communities write letters to the state, to the federal government, to the United States Department of Agriculture, those sorts of letters of outreach and seeking support only help the cause that the Water Commission fights and that the county staff fight to bring better connections to lower the costs for all of the members of these communities. So we're not alone. We want to work with you, but as Supervisor Sheeta said, we also need to communicate with the residents in these communities and let them know what they're paying for and what they're getting in return. Better outreach, I think, would go a long way in this case, too.
The other part is the federal government right now is looking at the new Farm Act, enacting the new Farm Act, and that is where the grants come from the USDA to help with these water projects. So we need that input into, try to get it into the Farm Bill to continue funding these water sewer projects in the future. With that, I make a motion to approve accepting Tonyville for confirmation by our staff.
And Mr. Chair, I will second that motion, but again, with the direction to staff and hopefully through the Water Commission that we can continue to look at a solution to this unsustainable issue. And so we can actually bring something that the people that live in these communities can feel good about each year rather than having to come and protest every year. So,
Question, is that for table 3 then? 3, which would be the 5 to 10%?
Would be the Exhibit A that's attached to the resolution with the exception of Tonyville.
Yes.
So we're back July 26th instead of the 22nd. We don't.
26th.
Okay, and I agree with you guys completely, but I also think that we need to get with these communities, just like we were saying, and show them exactly what our expenses are so that they understand that we're not raising these prices or we're actually showing you what a system costs to operate. And we're not even covering those costs. So I think we do need better communication with our communities out there, though. Motion made by Supervisor Ishida, second by Supervisor Vanderpool. Cast your votes. Okay, it's 3, 4, and 1. Cox voting against.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 6. Public hearing for adoption of fee adjustments for Tulare County Information Technology.
Good morning, members of the board, CAO, and council. I am Peg Yates, Tulare County IT Director. This adjustment to the fee charged to the title company is really driven by a change in technology. The circuits that were delivering the service to the title companies were a flat fee. They are now going to a per minute charge, and that charge was going to be astronomical in comparison. So we have researched and implemented a new technology that gives them web access and keeps their costs very close to what the costs were in the past. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions?
I just think that this is no one likes to see new fees, but I think that when you're replacing something that was far more expensive and less efficient with something that's going to improve service to the title companies and constituents, I think that's a really good thing. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
And with that, I would move for approval.
That's a public hearing.
It's a public hearing. Yep. Sorry.
Public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this issue may do it this time. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
There was a time when the boom was going on, the title companies were willing to pay for county staff to get this information. Very vital to it.
Yeah, it's great to see this come forward. With that, I'll move for approval at the correct time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Vanderpool, second by Supervisor Cox. Cast your votes. Vote unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
County Council, we have need for closed session.
Mr. Chairman, you have items, A through E on your board's closed session agenda. I do not anticipate any announcements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone being here this morning. We will now adjourn to closed session.